In the last video, we talked about the pros of Rise. In this, I want to tell you about the cons of Rise. Hopefully, you have access to this course. This course that I'm using is called Rise Overview. Rise Overview gives an overall view of when Rise is a good choice, some questions when Rise is most effective, some examples of how Rise has been used with WebSafe. But this also goes over cases where Rise is not appropriate. Let's go over those cases together. I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail. I'm thinking specifically about times when we're using Rise for a NorQuest class. One of the best parts about Moodle is Moodle does a great job of user management. That means for your individual students, you can change permissions. You can have different kinds of quizzes depending on the students in your class. You can have multiple attempts for your students. You could have situations where you have a special quiz designed for one student or 5 students or half the class. You could mix and match the questions. You could scramble your exams. Those kind of things are fantastic in standard learning management systems like Moodle. Rise doesn't let you do those things. Rise is not about learner-specific management. You can't change permissions. You can't have different kinds of users. Think of Rise like a book. Rise is great at presenting content and material. It's adding some interactions, but you're basically conformed to the book. Moodle is more like a kind of standard web package. It can change and mold and really fit the needs of a specific user. And the users won't be able to tell what's specifically made for them and what's specifically made for other people in the class. The other thing about Rise is formal. I'm going to actually view this as a course. We can look at these one at a time. Let's do that. Here's a case where Rise is good. This lovely interface. Okay, user management. The second is formal assessments. Rise will not let you make a direct connection between the user and the grade. I mean, you can, it is possible, but again, in the same way that that Moodle allows for easy interaction with a gradebook, Rise does not allow for easy integration into the gradebook. If the gradebook and assessments are the most important thing for your course, and that's true for a lot of classes at NorQuest, it's very important, if you're going to use Rise, you treat Rise again like the textbook, and you use Moodle as the place for the assessment. It's very easy to use the two at the same time. You could build your course material inside of Rise, or you could use a program or a course built in Rise, and then do all of your formal assessments inside of Moodle. That's no problem. It's actually quite easy to do. And from the learner perspective, you could embed the objects like the web page or the SCORM package from Rise straight into Moodle. From the learner's perspective, they would think, oh, this is all happening inside of the Moodle course. It's all the same. It's a nice way to structure it. But building formal assessments inside of Rise, it's not a great idea. Large-scale course management is not good in Rise. This is something that we ran into in WebSafe. If I wanted to duplicate blocks, those pieces inside of my lesson, between different courses, I'd have to take the whole lesson. If I have a complicated lesson and it's got, let's say, 15 or 20 elements, and there's 5 of them that I want that are scattered throughout the course, I can't just take those 5. I have to take the whole lesson and then delete the pieces that I don't want. This can become very tricky when you're talking about large-scale course management. If I'm worried about what version is that the one I was working on last time? Did somebody else edit it? Did somebody change this? Did we remember to fix the permissions? Stay away. Rise is a terrible choice if you're thinking about how to do anything at the highest level. If you're thinking about a course in its totality, like, oh, this is going to be our living course and it's going to be our working version for 5 years and we're going to share it between 3 different classes and we need all of our assessments built right in and we have to all be able to... Don't do it. If you're thinking about living curriculum, Rise is not your best choice. There are ways to do it if you wanted to, but it wouldn't be my first choice. And the next, of course, is budget constraints. Rise is always going to cost money. You're always going to have to pay for a license. And with that license, you're getting support externally. You can contact Rise or Articulate. You can You can contact Articulate to give you a hand, but the internal support at NorQuest will not exist. NorQuest will always give you support for products that they own. They'll give you support for Moodle. They'll give you support for Blackboard. They will not give you support for Rise. Now, maybe that could emerge in the future. Maybe the whole college decides, let's buy a Rise license. Sure. At that point, we can start to make that distinction. But at this point, it's going to cost you more money. Not only in terms of the actual license, but there's going to be a problem. Something will go wrong with your course. Someone's going to have to troubleshoot it. If that person is you, it's going to cost you time. It's going to be a problem. So again, the cons, user management is hard. I can't make specific pieces of my course for different kinds of users. Formal assessments are a bad idea. I can't effectively have Rise talk to my LMS. It's not as good. It can do it. It's not impossible. It's just not as good. For large-scale course management, it can be really tricky. If you're thinking about a large body of material, don't use Rise. Rise is best as a sort of closed object. A SCORM package, think of it like a textbook. Don't think of it like living curriculum. And last, it's always going to cost more. It's going to cost more either in terms of licensing or in terms of time. Those are the big cons to Rise. If your project is not subject to those cons, no problem. Now, in the last video, I'm going to talk about the review capabilities of Rise and the exporting capabilities of Rise. So our first video was pros, this video was cons, and our last video is going to be all about exporting features. Thanks very much for joining. I hope this made your choice easier.